Thank you very much for accepting our invitation to the growing lecture that we're going to have today, Doctorado Interinstitucional en Educación, Facultad de Ciencias y Educación, y su programa de la licenciatura en Educación Básica con énfasis en inglés, junto con el Instituto de Lenguas de la Universidad Distrital y LUD, les da la bienvenida a toda la audiencia. I have invited Professor Raúl Alberto Mora, who works with me in the research group Formación de Educadores. He's come to town to teach a seminar to the doctoral students with me in the area of research in language. I've known Raúl Alberto for quite a long time, from when he was a student already in the Universidad Pontificia Bolivariana, and I was working for as a copy, profesor de inglés. So it's been a long time of friendship, a long time of working together. I proposed the topic of today because I saw the need to discuss with the audience this dilemma between functional uses of the language vis-a-vis language as part of learning the culture, learning to be a better person, to grow personally and professionally. And I thought of no better person but Raúl to accompany us in the discussion. As you probably read in the advertisement and announcement of this conference, Raúl holds a PhD en Educación Secundaria y Continua del Departamento de Currículo e Instrucción en la Universidad de Illinois en Urbana-Champaign, y sus áreas de especialización académica son el lenguaje y la literacidad, la formación docente y la investigación cualitativa. Su disertación doctoral es titulada "An Analysis of the Literacy Beliefs and Practices of Faculty and Graduates from a Pre-Service English Teacher Education Program." This study was conducted in Colombia, right? In the US? In the US. And he holds an MA in Education from Departamento de Currículo e Instrucción de la Universidad de Illinois en Urbana-Champaign, licenciado en Lenguas Modernas de la Universidad Pontificia Bolivariana, y tiene muchas publicaciones en el área de literacidad, segunda lengua. También es un distinguido scholar de la Fulbright Scholar Program Alumni. Como lo dije al comienzo, trabaja con nosotros en la Universidad Distrital como profesor invitado del Doctorado Interinstitucional de Educación. So, thank you, Raúl, for accepting our invitation. We have a very good turnout today from Levey students, from ILUT teachers, from professors and teachers from Licenciatura de Educación Básica, and from the general public. So, we are going to be having a 1 hour and 15 minutes lecture, and then the floor will be open for questions or comments. Raúl, let's welcome Raúl with an applause. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Can you all hear me okay? Can you hear me? Okay. Well, first, I would like to start by thanking Rigoberto for not only for the invitation, but also for his extended support to my own work over the years. Yes, we have known each other for about 20 years. Can't believe it's been that long. Yeah, I was an undergrad, just like many of you, and he was a professor, developing his career, probably like I am right now. And it has become a very productive collaboration between the two of us. And I'm very excited to be joining you this morning to discuss some topics regarding language education, language teaching, language policy in Colombia. As the title of the presentation so indicates, have we told our children why they should learn another language? A critical discussion on the new roles and questions for language learning in Colombia. I wanted to start, and while I was preparing the presentation, I reminded myself of an interesting quote by Dickens that I think it fits Colombia, fits the ELT community, fits the nation at large in light of everything that's happened recently. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. Those of you in literature, you know that's the beginning of the book A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. And in light of everything that had transpired this weekend, I thought this would be a good start. Because Colombia right now, the country, the educational system, finds itself at a crossroads. We are facing what I would like to call a critical moment in the field of language education. More and bigger and larger and more crucial questions about learning are beginning to appear. There is this priority, this interest, this concern, this, I could even go as far as an obsession with bilingualism in Colombia. The angled brackets, I have been using that for over a year when I talk about bilingualism, meaning that right now one of the problems with the concept of bilingualism is that there are as many definitions as people who talk about it. And a number of those people sometimes don't know what they're talking about, but they talk about bilingualism anyway. And bilingualism and bilingual policies have become a necessity, a priority. They have become important in cities, province, and the country. And there are questions about the implementation or the application or adoption or adaptation, however you want to frame it, of the Common European Framework for Reference. I think all of you, since you're in languages, you've heard of this. You've heard of the Common European Framework for Reference. On top of that, now the discussions about languages are not just about English. Now, Spanish in Colombia has become a priority. There are more and more initiatives, more and more questions, more and more interested parties in Spanish in Colombia. And in Colombia, we have a number of languages in contact, and I would say languages in conflict. But we have questions that we haven't really talked about. We still need to talk about issues of language and human rights. Many issues of languages have to do with human rights. We still have to discuss what we mean by appropriation of a language and what we mean by owning a language. When we talk about English, when we talk about Spanish, when we talk about French, when we talk about indigenous languages, whose languages are they? That's a question we have to address at some point. And there are issues of the purposes and intents for you to learn a language. So in this presentation, I want to engage with all of you in an exercise of what I like to call reflexivity. And I understand reflexivity based on Bourdieu's work, and I define it as a scientific and social reflection whose purpose is to promote positive change in the communities in which we interact. So keep that definition in mind as we are discussing the topics this morning. And I want to start a reflexivity about some big questions we have to ask. And to start thinking of ourselves in terms of advocacy and in terms of counter-narratives. We have to listen to other people. We have to discover other voices. And yes, when you talk about advocacy, sometimes you have, as they say in English, you have to fight the good fight. While some elements of this presentation are going to show some sad statistics, I don't want the presentation to be bleak. I don't want it to be sad. I don't want it to be pessimistic, if you will. I want the presentation to have a hopeful tone and to have a moment, what I like to call positive outrage. And I'm using the reference of that famous book that came out last year by World War I veteran Stefan Hessel. It was basically called A Call for Outrage, or in Spanish was called Indignados, that it came from France, and it was was very well known because they say that it was one of the books that inspired all the Occupy movements that we heard in the news from last year. The presentation itself will have three parts. First, I'll give you an overview from my own experience, from my own analysis, of some of the realities we've noticed in terms of language learning and teaching. And then I'll start problematizing those realities. And I'll try to read between the lines in terms of what these realities tell us and what these realities forget to tell us. And then finally, I'll go into the more, let's say, propositive part of the presentation where I'll talk about the roles and questions for language learning and teaching today. So let's take a look at what's going on here. And let's see what's happening in some context of language learning and teaching in Colombia. First of all, for better or for worse, we have to accept the fact that there is government support for language initiatives. And I don't want to start by demonizing them and saying there is support. There is an interest in language learning and teaching. The fact that there are bilingualism policies and that are becoming more and more frequent shows that there is a concern. We'll get to how guided or misguided the concern is later, but there is a concern, and we can start from there. I'll give you an example from Antioquia. And both policies at the city and the state level, Antioquia la más educada, which is the policy from Governor Fajardo, and Medellín un hogar para la vida, which is the policy from Mayor Aníbal Gaviria, in their projects, in the plans, bilingualism is one of the top priorities of the government. So they want to create an Antioquia bilingue and a Medellín bilingue, whatever that means. And I'm pretty sure Bogota has similar policies at the district and the province level. Which, if you look at the policies of Mayor Petro, you'll find somewhere that they talk about bilingualism as something that people want to pay attention to. And if we start looking in other parts of the country, we will probably find similar policies in place. There is more funding for language programs, and there are options for immersion programs, and I know that there are initiatives to promote after-school programs, or what they call jornada complementaria. I know in Medellín we have them because I had the chance to talk to people at Secretary of Education, and they explain to you they have like 15 or 20 different projects they have going on in terms of language. More recently, there is a push to turn Colombia into a site for language learning. And we know about this program, Spanish in Colombia. We have seen the ads, the commercials saying the answer is Colombia, and they're inviting people to learn Spanish in Colombia. And Caricuervo has started a very aggressive campaign to promote Colombia as a site for learning Spanish. There are in the air proposals to turn the archipelago of San Andres into a place for people to go and learn English and learn to teach English. We have more and more language teaching assistants, language specialists. I know, for example, a lot of universities in Colombia now have a teaching assistant from Fulbright. Some others have teaching assistants that ICETEX brings via the British Council to help with language centers, with help with the licenciaturas. I think you probably have one here. Bolivariana have one as well. We also have a gradual increase in graduate programs in second language. A statistic I found is up until 2012, when we started doing our groundwork to create our master's program at the university. There were in Colombia 12 programs in English, Spanish, or French. In the 1 year, ever since I started doing that review, we already have about 5 or 6 new master's programs or new programs in Spanish, English, or French. So up to 2012, we had 12 programs, and in 1 year, we already raised by 50%. It's a promising but not super optimistic statistic, because we need more programs. Especially we need more programs in the regions. And there are more initiatives for language certification. I made a reference to the iSpeak program. That's a program that the Ministry of Commerce and Tourism promotes for people to certify themselves as language users and language interpreters. So there are more opportunities that are arising. There are more concerned, or the Ministry of Education seems to be more preoccupied about the quality of language programs and the quality of teacher education. There are initiatives, for example, to improve the BA language education programs. There are some projects that the ministry has where accredited universities in the city, different cities, go and work with higher education institutions at the technical and technological levels to help them improve their proposals for language learning and teaching in their own institutions. So there are efforts, and the government has shown an interest. So that is a starting point, that there is a common concern that we have to do something in terms of language learning and teaching, that we have to do something in terms of bilingualism, that every policy, every initiative you read, they set these really lofty, really high expectations that they want graduates in Colombia to leave with their diplomas and a certification of a B1. I think it's that. Yeah, I think it's B1. And I think they're B1 or B2 depending on the program. And the expectation for licenciados, I think, is C1. Whether that's realistic or attainable, that's a very different debate. But those are the expectations, and they're everywhere. The ink is everywhere. And there's funding, and there's an interest, and they're trying to train teachers, they're trying to develop professional development. And then we start finding things like this. So, in order for, as I was preparing my presentation last night, I found, for example, this article in El Tiempo. And the article says, which I mean, personally, when I read the title, I wanted to actually go under my bed and hide. Yeah, reading this news, I wanted to crawl under my bed and hide. And I was going to call Rigoberto, I'm too scared to go to give this talk. Just call somebody else. Get somebody from the British Council or something, because I'm scared. This headline, this is like horror movie. Profesores de inglés en Colombia también se rajan. I'm like, okay, are you trying to demonize? Are you trying to make us feel uncomfortable? Are you trying to prove a point? What are you trying to do here? Solo el 25% alcanza un nivel intermedio de dominio de ese idioma. I'm like, oh my God. I thought I was reading a horror movie, like a Stephen King book or something like that. I was scared. Then I continue. And I found this little snippet on El Tiempo from CTTV talking about the language proficiency in Colegios Calendario A, which is basically the ones that go year-round. They say 80% of students in those schools are at a low or really low level, which is basically they're the A2, A1, or the one we had to come up with, which is A-1. 7% are intermediate and 2% are advanced. Which is kind of scary when you think about it. And it says and so the statistics are saying that students have a very low level of English, that students are not learning English, that the proficiency exams, las pruebas saber, the standardized tests, they're taking the FCE, the IELTS, and God knows what other batteries, or the OOPT, or I'm running out of acronyms, TOEFL or whatever, that the scores are dismal, and you hear the reports, and they come to us in the faculty of education, and we get scared, and our deans begin to worry. They call us for emergency meetings because of this. Then they look at I found the diagnostics of language tests for English teachers, and they say about a good number of them are B2 or maybe beyond. There is a good portion at B, but they say the majority of them are at the A2, A1, and pre-A. And I'm like, pre-A, so we had to come up with a level because we cannot even get to that level. Okay. I guess whoever did the statistics knows what they're talking about. And then I found this, some reports about language proficiency, about English language proficiency in the world, and they say that basically Latin America, we are at the bottom of the totem pole. They say Colombia is placed as number 50 in the world, right below Chile, Venezuela, Salvador, Ecuador, and Guatemala. It means that basically no one speaks English in Colombia. I mean, based on that, basically, based on that chart, I'm going to go and venture and say that I have everybody here who speaks English. I mean, based on those statistics, I'm going to think that I'm giving the conference, I'm giving this presentation to the only people who speak English in Colombia, because I'm starting to get really scared. I'm starting to get really scared. I don't know you, but I'm scared. I'm scared of this landscape. I'm worried. I'm about to start running. I'm about to tell everybody to move, and I'm gonna run and go back to the airport. So those are the realities that they give us. They give us some statistics. And the message seems to be, yes, there is help, there is funding, there is interest, and yet people are not responding. We're bringing people, we're bringing teachers, we're bringing Fulbright assistants, we're bringing programs, we're bringing new software, and we're bringing new websites, and the British Council is helping, the American Embassy is helping, and people are not learning. That is the message that I read when I read those news reports, when I read what comes out in El Tiempo, in El Colombiano, in the reports from different universities in Colombia. And yes, and I begin to feel terrified because I'm in the field of second language learning and teaching. I'm a researcher in the field. I train teachers at every level, undergrads, Especialización, master's, doctorate, and I start getting worried. Then I remind myself I'm a critical theorist. And as a critical theorist, you learn to always read between the lines. As a critical theorist, I always remind myself, Raúl, read between the lines. And that's the next part of this presentation. So when I start looking at the readings of resources and results, the first question I ask myself, okay, so who should we blame? Who's the culprit here? Or even, who's the scapegoat? Who are we going to blame for everything? Who are we going to blame for everything that's wrong and evil in this world? Who is our Voldemort here? Yeah, we need to find a Voldemort. You know who. Because we have to. So, should we blame teachers? I mean, yeah, should we blame teachers? I mean, maybe teachers are not doing their job. Maybe we should blame their teacher educators because they're not doing their job. I mean, if we have all this funding and all these opportunities for immersions and assistance and software and students are still not learning, it has to be your fault, right, teachers? Because, I mean, seriously, you're not doing your job. I mean, they're telling you can go to Canada and learn English and you're not going, so it's your fault. Or should we blame the children? Maybe it's because the children just don't want to learn. Maybe they're not wired to learn. Maybe this generation and all their technology and all their smartphones and Facebook and Candy Crush. Maybe that's what happened. Let's blame children and Candy Crush. I mean, it's worth. I mean, they have blamed rap. I mean, come on, they have blamed rap music and videos for a lot of things. I can blame Candy Crush for this one. I mean, just to give rap a break. I'm gonna blame Candy Crush on this one. So children and Candy Crush. No, let's blame parents. Because, today's parents are not educating those children. It's not like our parents and our grandparents who had a strong iron hand on us. And we never misbehaved. Oh, no, we never did anything wrong or illegal in our lives, right? Because hindsight is 20/20, and revisionist history is beautiful. So let's blame parents. Or simply, let's just go and blame the government. Because, the evil government, Big Brother. Let's blame Big Brother. They're just sending us those English programs to watch over us. They're in cahoots with the NSA. So we could start there. We could start blaming everybody, and we could blame everybody. And we could say everybody's guilty. But one of the problems we have is that we have been playing the blame game for too long. And especially when you start looking at bilingualism, at the topic of bilingualism and bilingual policy, the debates are really intense. The debates are really, really heated. There is a lot of finger pointing from the people who promote the plan and from the people who oppose the plan. I mean, those debates can get nasty. I mean, I'm telling you, they can get nasty. And there is a lot of finger pointing. No, it's your fault. You're evil. No, you don't. And they say, no, you just don't understand the plan. And they say, no, you just don't get it. You don't understand what you wrote. And they start blaming each other. The problem is that when you start polarizing a debate and you start worrying more about proving the other person is wrong or proving that you're right, which are not necessarily the same thing. Sometimes you can develop an entire line of argumentation on proving everybody's wrong, or you can develop your entire argumentation to prove you're right. But these debates lose sight and stop paying attention to the construction of knowledge. And most importantly, sometimes the debates stop paying attention at who is losing in the statistics and who is lost in the statistics. And I want you to pay attention to those two. Because some people are losing in the statistics and some people disappear from the statistics. Losing and lost. Some people disappear from the statistics because sometimes we need to show good results. We need to convince people that this is working. And sometimes the easiest way, and statistics, as important and useful as they are, they can be deceiving. If I ask the people who just got here if they had arepa, and I ask the four of you, do you have arepa in Guanábana? Yes or no? Do you have arepita, the snack? Do you have it? Do you have it? Yes. How many arepas do you have? One or two? I had two. 50% of the population had two arepas for breakfast. So you have to be careful with statistics because you can play with them. Right there, I told you, 50% of the population of the sample, in a sample that I just conducted, I proved that 50% of people had two arepas. I mean, I'm simplifying this, but I'm trying to make a point that sometimes you have to be careful when you read statistics and see who benefits from the statistics you read and who is left out, not even behind, out of said statistics. Then we have to begin to problematize bilingualism. Because here is we're going to find a lot of issues that we have to think about carefully. Now, as I told you, right now bilingualism is commonplace. Everybody talks about bilingualism. You see it on the street. You see that there are bilingual high schools. There are bilingual elementary schools. There are bilingual kindergartens. There are párvulos bilingües. Like, I don't even know what the hell. I'm like, okay, what does that mean anyway? Párvulos bilingües, like, okay, like, yeah, because I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere in one of those books by Chomsky. I'm pretty sure I read that in one of Chomsky's books on linguistics in the 1970s, that he talked about bilingual párvulos. Yeah. And they keep doing this. And everything is bilingual. So now it's, even parties, like rumba bilingüe. Now you have rumba bilingüe, like, okay, sure, whatever makes you happy. And you have like restaurantes bilingües and everything now is bilingual. And that, when everybody's, and the problem is when everybody starts using the term, but you're not careful to really ask what it means, then you start diluting the term. The term starts losing power. When you become so popular that it loses power because it means everything. And bilingualism for some people actually means something else. I worry personally that many definitions of bilingualism today are one-dimensional. So what is bilingualism? Bilingualism is that moment when you exercise domain over two languages. Oh, when you can dominate the mother language and dominate the second language. All right, then I get really sarcastic, I really snarky, as I usually am when I'm teaching. And I tell my students, okay guys, here's what you need to remember. There are only two people in the world who dominate a language. People with a doctorate in philology in that language and beauty pageants, and beauty queens. And you see them, yeah, and beauty pageant contestants. Miss Bogota is working on her degree in business education from university, blah blah blah, and she dominates English. And I'm like, oh, she dominates English. Like, I have friends with PhDs in English literature who don't even make that claim because they know better. But sure, let's go for the record that there are People who go to Cartagena, they dominate English. But it becomes one-dimensional in the sense that now we only understand bilingualism as balanced bilingualism. Which is, yeah, you have perfect use of English and Spanish in every possible scenario. No. Bilingualism is not black and white. It's not even shades of green. Bilingualism is the Crayola box. For those of you who know, those Crayola boxes have like 60 colors and colors you don't even know they existed, with names that you didn't even know existed. That's bilingualism. Some analysis of bilingualism have given us a taxonomy of about 30 to 40 different kinds of bilingualism. Balanced is just one category of bilingualism. It's not the only one. In my view, if you have the moment you begin to learn a language, a second language, you become bilingual. That is my understanding. So the problem with this one-dimensional view is that sometimes policies reflect that view. And they become myopic. They become a little short-sighted. Because they narrow down bilingualism to English. And I'm not saying you shouldn't learn English. I think we should. It's a language that is the language that's operating, and it helps us gain access to the big debates in the fields. But we should not narrow down or equate bilingualism with English. Because the moment you equate bilingualism with English, as I'll mention later, you start leaving a lot of people out of the equation. A lot of them. Another problem I have found with this definition of bilingualism is that they seem to operate with the assumption that we are monolingual. That Colombia is a monolingual country. And even I found recent articles that they still say, yeah, because Colombia is monolingual. Like, oh, okay, I don't know what Colombia you live in, but not the one where I live. We still have found literature that talks about Colombia as a monolingual language. With an assumption that you have to bring language into the cities. No, we have to bring English to Bogota. We have to bring English to Medellin. But it ignores the fact that even before that, the languages have been in cities before the policy suggested they should be there. English, as I have found in a study in actually this 2013, but anyway, as I have found in a recent study I'm conducting at the university, looking at English language practices in urban spaces. English is everywhere. And it's becoming more complex. It's more complex in graffiti, it's more complex in tattoos, it's more complex even in shopping malls. One finding we discovered is that 5-10 years ago, you basically only found English in the names of the stores. So it was Raúl's. You have seen those. Although with that name, I should probably bring my scissors and my clippers so I can cut your hair. But anyway, Raúl's, that sounds like a hairdresser's name or something like that. Now what we find is that English is not even the name. It's just everywhere in the mall. So now you see phrases, you see songs, and it's part of the publicity, it's part of the image of the stores. Now they use it for motivational purposes. And that's, for me, that's a huge change in how language is emerging in the city. So we need to look at language not from the traditional way, but a little more open. And then here's an interesting fact from the Ministry of Culture. Colombia recognizes 65 indigenous languages, recognizes Palenquero and Creole. Palenquero, that's the one in Cartagena, and Creole in San Andres. Recognizes the Romani language from the Gypsies, and although it's not here, it also recognizes Colombian Sign Language. So, doing a quick math, that's 65, 67, 68, 69. Plus Spanish, that's 70 languages in Colombia. 70. Not 7, not 17, not 1. 70. Let that sink for 1 second. 70 languages are recognized in Colombia. Spanish is only one of them. So I've been asking this question when I talk about the topic, because first of all, these numbers don't lie. We are not a monolingual country. In fact, we're not even a bilingual country. I have made a joke that going from multilingualism to bilingualism is like if you're driving a Ferrari today and you switch to a Twingo tomorrow. It's like basically the same. Like, yeah, today I'm driving an Ferrari, and then the next day, no, stop driving that. You need to start driving a Twingo. Okay. So why should I go from a multilingual country to a bilingual country? Isn't that like a step back? If you think about it critically, if we're a multilingual country and we start talking about bilingualism, isn't that a step back? Isn't that like going from the Iron Age back to the Stone Age? It's like going from, no, let's go back, everybody go back to the quill, writing with ink, like back in the day, like in Harry Potter. No, stop using pens. Everybody start using ink and quills to write. And you're going to use papyrus, not paper. You're going to go back to papyrus. For me, it's pretty much the same step back. Colombia is a multilingual country. Multilingualism is spread everywhere. And it's perfectly fine. Perfect bilingualism doesn't exist. People sometimes say, yeah, look at Canada. Guys, Canada is not a bilingual country. Canada is a country where there are 2 official languages. It's very different. Because people in Vancouver don't speak French, and people in Quebec City don't speak English. Oh, Switzerland. Switzerland is trilingual. No. Switzerland is a country that is divided in 3 distinct language areas. French Switzerland, Italian Switzerland, and German Switzerland. Where is the multilingualism there when you separate the country geographically by languages? Now, an example of bilingual countries, think of Philippines, where they actually brought back Tagalog. After having English and Spanish as languages, they have made an effort to bring Tagalog as the official language along with English and Spanish. When I think of a bilingual country, New Zealand. New Zealand is a country that is so bilingual, even their anthem is in English and in Maori. That's a different level of bilingualism. So when I look at Colombia and I look at a bilingual country, a multilingual country, mind you, I start asking myself a question. If we're multilingual, if we have 69 languages, plus all the European languages that are here, English, French, German, when we think about Portuguese in Brazil and Portuguese in the border, why are we still talking about one bilingual plan? Why do we have one national plan of bilingualism that basically narrows down the whole conversation in a country with 69 languages, plus languages in the border, plus languages that are coming through immigrants and second-generation immigrants, and we narrow it down to one plan, to one language? That becomes problematic. Let me get some water first. A few slides ago, I made a reference about the debates, and I said that one of the problems of the debates is that they lose track of who is losing and is lost in the statistics. And I start, based on what we talked before, then I start asking questions. Who is not in the conversation? And I start thinking, first of all, of the indigenous populations. Where are those 65 languages in those national bilingual plans? Where are children in those bilingual plans? And where are teachers in those bilingual plans? Both in the discussions, in the implementation, in the thinking, and everything in between. We have frameworks that are leaving people out of equations. Ideas like a very traditional notion of foreign language. And I have personally raised a lot of questions about the use of foreign language today. Even from the definition. Think about the definition of foreign and the synonyms of the word foreign. I talked about this last year in Asocopy, and I did a discussion from the etymology itself. Foreign means strange, alien, not from here, from other places, that is not mine, that is different from me. So we're talking about a language that is different from me, that is alien, that is weird, that is strange, because that's all it means of foreign. Foreign means not mine. Let that sink in for a moment. And then, of course, there is an issue of equality that in Colombia, even though the word of the law says, in Colombia, English is a foreign language, we do have a structure, a de facto structure of ESL in Colombia. We have it. Think about those bilingual schools in Bogota, those big schools where they have like 20 teachers of English, and the student-to-teacher ratio is 1 to 15, 1 to 10, rooms with new furniture, flat-screen TVs, laptops. Students get access to native speakers and highly educated teachers of English. They have access to internet, technology. They do video conferences. They go on immersion programs. I honestly can't see where that is a structure of foreign language. And what I see is inequality. A structure that promotes learning for some people in those private bilingual schools, whereas the schools from the district, they consider themselves lucky if they have an English teacher to begin with. So we have a structure that is unequal. And that is problematic. Because even though the policy says one thing, the practice is promoting other aspects of inequality and exclusion. We're still thinking of language immersion from outside, not from within. Meaning, you're learning English to go to Disneyland. So you can go hang out with Mickey Mouse. That's why you learn English, because you want to go to Washington. Yeah, that's the reason you go to learn English, to go to Washington, right? I mean, I'm not saying it's not a good thing to learn English if you want to study abroad or you want to go and do your graduate education abroad. If I said, no, don't study English to study abroad, I would be a hypocrite. Because I got my education in the United States. It would make me a huge hypocrite, and I'll probably have to leave this room right now. So I'm not saying, no, it's not a good idea to study abroad. What I'm saying is, that cannot be the only reason why you're learning English here, now and today. There has to be an immersion from within. An immersion with the language right here and right now. Because what's at stake here is an issue of appropriation. Are we appropriating? Are we owning the language? 2, 3, 4, 5. Some people are taking a nap. Maybe I should speak slower so that's not to disturb them. It's Bogota. It's cold. I know. You feel like I'll try to speak. I don't think so loud, so as not to wake them up. So appropriation is the heart of the matter here. It's what's at stake is how we appropriate the language and the motivations we have. Where does your motivation to learn English come from? And most importantly, what is your position about English? Are we still using those old 1960 models of we hate English because Yankee go home? Or do we feel English now belongs to us? And if it belongs to you, how? And most importantly, why? Why should English be one of your languages? And that leads me finally to returning to the title of this presentation. Because one of the things I have found is that while on the one hand, and I will acknowledge, I'm not going to start demonizing the government just for the sake of demonizing, I will acknowledge there is a genuine interest in improving learning and teaching. That they're really interested and they want to. The only thing we heard, and here's what becomes problematic, the discourse has geared toward telling people they need to learn English or they need to learn another language. Now, you need to learn English because that's good because we are in a globalized country, because we have now free trade agreements, because the economy needs you to speak another language, because that gives you opportunities to move and to gain capital and gives you social mobility. That is the overarching discourse in terms of languages. However, and I return to the question with which we began the presentation. Have we really told people why they should learn a language? Have they ever told us, listen, here's why you really should learn English? Or have they told us, learn English? Because that is the bigger question. Have they told any of you ever, at some point in your education, why you should learn English? Or did they just start teaching English to you? Or your parents, did they ever explain to your parents why it was a good idea to learn English? What are the real motivations? And I complicate this further. And I ask myself, and I ask my teachers, and I ask you as teachers, do we know why we should teach another language? I mean, what are the motivations that are propelling us, that are fueling us to teach another language? Why do we teach English or Spanish or French or Portuguese or German in urban areas? What is the reason why we learn English in Bogota, in the city of Bogota? And then what is the reason we learn English in, let's say, Fusa? Is it the same reason? Is it for the same purposes? Why do we learn English in Medellin? And why do we learn English in Chocó? Is it the same reason? Does it work the same way? But sometimes in the policies where they're so standardized, that question gets lost in translation. Importantly, why do we teach English or a different language from the indigenous language in an indigenous community? Why should we teach English to the indigenous people in, let's say, in Santa Marta, or the indigenous people in Leticia, in Amazonas? Why should we teach them English? In fact, the question is, if we're going to teach them a second language, or a third, because we're teaching them Spanish as a second language, does it have to be English? Should we prioritize, for example, Portuguese for people in Amazonas, and maybe leave English for later? But the policy sometimes forgets to talk about that. Which just brings me to now, as they say on the flights, here's your captain speaking. We have officially begun the descent. Please fasten your seatbelts and pull your upright tables and stop and finish your coffee. Because now we're going to look at some proposals I have. And they're proposals. I mean, things that I'm working on and I intend to work on in the near future. 4 calls and 4 challenges. 1. We need more alternative and organic practices for second language learning in Colombia. We know we need to accept the fact that we're plurilingual or multilingual. We have to have more grounded reasons to learn a second language. And finally, we have to call for advocacy from academia and from research. And I'll develop each point as we go. Before I forget, in the very last slide, you're going to find a link where you can actually, by tomorrow, you will be able to download the whole presentation as a PDF file. So, first thing, when you talk about alternative and organic practices, we have to start raising questions about the labels we use for languages today. And again, we have to start wondering, is foreign language enough? Is foreign language covering the realities of the linguistic ecologies today? And do we need to reformulate foreign language, or do we have to find another term that replaces it? I'm saying that we should replace it, but I'm not going to start indoctrinating people. People should make their choice, and if they stick to foreign language, they need to reformulate it because it's not responding to the geographical and social and technological realities that we face today. We need to look more carefully at what's going on in the field of world languages. Questions about additional languages, new languages, languages in contact, those are terms that are in contention today. And look at languages from global, local, and glocal. Remember the merger between the global and local and how they play together in today communities. We need to look at languages as spaces for super diversity. I mean, levels of diversity that transcend the traditional geography or the traditional conceptions of race or the traditional conceptions of ethnicity. And we start looking more carefully at how we have urban languages in Colombia, urban second languages. And at some point, we'll have to start looking at rural languages. Because we cannot forget, because if there's one thing that I think this past week should have taught us, is not to forget about the rural. I think if we learned one thing from last weekend is we need to start looking back at the rural. And that also involves us in teaching and us in languages. We devote too much time to urban languages and urban studies, but we forget about the rural. We need to look at language learning and teaching as organic matters. And I like the idea of organic that Antonio Gramsci talks about. Communities should be leading their own frameworks. Language immersion should become a way for you to share your problems, your issues, your happiness, your joy, your sadness, your sorrow, your excitement about life and everything in between with others. So let's stop thinking of language as a way to learn about others, which is fine, and we should do it. But let's bring the second ingredient of using languages to teach others about who we are, and even to teach ourselves who we are. The beauty of having multiple languages is that you have more ways to express yourself. So now your expression becomes more colorful as you continue adding languages. We have to remind ourselves, we are plurilingual. Some people don't only speak one language, but that doesn't change the fact that there are 65 languages in Colombia. And if we can say that countries like Canada and Switzerland are multilingual because they have official languages, but even though the number of truly bilingual speakers in those countries is minimum, why can we say Colombia is plurilingual? Just because we don't speak one of the indigenous languages. Maybe when we start labeling ourselves as plurilingual, we may start giving those indigenous languages the value they should have in our community. We need to look at diversity of language, at the borders. What's going on in the border with Brazil? What's going on with the borders, even in the Spanish borders? There is something happening and we have to pay attention to it. Again, our cities, we have to pay attention to them. Our rural areas, we have to pay attention, a lot of it, to them. We have to propose language policy that looks at English or Spanish or French or whatever language, not as an end. Policy should not be saying, the end of the policy, the goal is to learn English. The policy should tell you that English will become a means for you to learn a third language, a fourth language, to learn more knowledge, to learn about the world, but not turn learning the language as the end, but as the means. And we have to promote policies that promote additive bilingualism, that motivate people into learning multiple languages, not that promote the sacrifice of languages to learn. Whether it's policies for English or policies for Spanish in the case of indigenous people, policies should promote additive bilingualism. For those who might be unfamiliar with the idea of subtractive bilingualism, it means that's the kind of bilingualism where you have to sacrifice one language to learn another. So when you replace one for another, that is called subtractive bilingualism, because you are erasing one language to impose another. We have to have good reasons to learn. I believe learning languages is very important. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in the business of language learning and teaching. But it has to be informed. What are our communities gaining from learning a second language? What are the cognitive benefits? Sometimes they don't talk about it. They talk about the economic benefits or the social, but have we talked about the cognitive benefits of being multilingual? And there's a lot of research that proves that multilingual speakers develop certain cognitive competences that monolingual people may not. We need to look again at the language needs of our communities. And we have to frame language in terms of equity, growth, and in an equitable integration to societies. If by promoting languages we're marginalizing communities, then that policy needs to be revised, needs to be revisited, because then that policy is wrong. And I think finally we have to start thinking of ourselves, those in academia. We have to continue being stronger, or we have to get more involved as advocates. We need to start asking those tough questions. And we have to stop thinking in terms of polarizing debates. We have to think about synergy. We have to think about working together. We have to think about that, stop thinking of our own campuses as these little farms, or little islands isolated from everybody else, and think of ourselves as a larger community. And be really concerned for teachers' conditions and how they work, how they teach, how they learn. We need to look again at professional development. Academics and research groups are the people who should lead professional development. People in the periphery, people in other areas related to education, they should help. But maybe they should be the ones leading, because maybe they don't have the time and the human resources to think in terms of professional development. They have other resources they can bring to the table, but not necessarily the knowledge and the expertise. We have to have this professional development very well balanced among pre-service teachers, the period of induction, the first few years after graduation, and in service. Sometimes in academia we focus a lot on pre-service and we forget about in-service. And we have to continue pushing people in our field to go for real advanced education. And by real advanced education, I mean encouraging people to go for master's degrees, encouraging those of you who are daring and crazy and smart and motivated and driven and insane enough to go for a PhD. And devote your time and effort to get that, because that is what can help the profession grow. It's not you can get other forms of professional development, but that is not going to help all of you grow as a community. We need more research, both conceptual and applied. We need to have research that you can implement yourselves to answer those questions I was asking. We need to consider research that looks at the rural populations and looks at indigenous populations more carefully. And we need to do research in terms of organic expertise. We have to be more involved. You, especially the younger ones, particularly the younger ones, the ones who are beginning the first semester, second semester, this is the time where you have to get involved in those debates. And you have to put your professors on task to be involved in those debates, to propose alternatives and ways to solve these problems, and more visibility for our proposals. Sometimes we have great ideas that we never share, that we never publish, that we never present. We leave them in our desks, we leave them in our computers, and that's what happens. Sometimes things happen as they happen. Now, just to finish, I believe this is a time for what I would like to call positive outrage. So yes, I told you this morning when I started the presentation that I was outraged and I was concerned. And I'm outraged that students are not learning. I'm outraged when I read those dismal statistics. It makes my blood boil. It makes me angry, or as they say now with the meme, it makes my grinds gear. Grinds gear. When policies that are nice and look good do not live up to the expectations. And it makes me really angry when I see children in schools who do not want to learn anymore. I don't know, but it makes me angry. Like Incredible Hulk angry. Yes. Yes, that's my secret, guys. I'm always angry. Sorry, I had to throw an Avengers reference right there. And it makes me really angry when I see teachers who don't want to teach anymore. When you talk to teachers, they tell you, I wanted to teach, and now I don't, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to go somewhere else when I don't have to do this. And they don't tell you that with happiness, which is the funny thing. When you talk to teachers who have to leave the profession, they don't tell you that with excitement like, yeah, I'm done with those crazy kids. No. Some of them don't even talk about the kids. They don't talk about the children. The children are the reason they left. Many teachers who leave don't leave because of the children. That's not the reason they leave. That is the reason that's the reason why they stay longer than sometimes they wanted to. So it's not the children why they leave. It's everything. It's the other things that we have to deal that sometimes make our life difficult and kill the passion and the joy for teaching. So yes, those things make me outraged, make me angry. That was new. But I know that being outraged or being angry is not going to cut it anymore. So we have to propose accountability that we are proposing, that we are engaged and we're participating. If you don't participate, then you're just being angry. You're just being an angry bird, and that's it. Yeah, you can be an angry bird, and that's fine and dandy, but no, you have to act. We have to open new debates and more questions, more debates, more dialogue, more transaction. We have to think of ourselves as protagonists of these debates. So just to finish, I'm going to read a quote from the book by Stefan Hessel. And he says, "To you who will create the 21st century, we say from the bottom of our hearts, to create is to resist. To resist is to create." Thank you.
Hello. Okay. Thank you very much, Raúl, for that wonderful presentation.
In an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a favor for people who are in the steps to move forward so that the people who are in the back can participate in the discussion. Yes, please. Come in. All right. So, as it is usual in these encounters, we are left with more questions than answers. I particularly feel that Raúl's presentation is a call for us to think differently and for the things that we know, to move them into action. So I would like to entertain some questions, some comments, some reactions that you may want to have. I'll pass on the mic to whoever wants to ask the question. You may ask the question in any of the 70 languages that we have. All right? And we'll just try to translate. All right. So, reactions. You don't have to ask questions, but reactions or comments to Raúl's presentation, please. Let's start on the left. Anyone? Oh, nobody? In the middle? All right, please. Your name, affiliation, and your question or comment.
Hello, Mr. Mora. Hello, everybody. I'm from Uniminuto University. Uniminuto is another university. I think, Mr. Mora, that you got the point that our government and our plans are not good focused. But the problem is that our Ministry of Culture, our Ministry of Development, is a politician, okay? And you are facing that. We are facing that. And you have to tell us just one way to avoid that it means that we are getting into trouble. Because policies are from politicians, not from academics.
Right? Anyone from the right?
I would like to respond to that. I think it deserves a response.
Okay, yes. Let's take all the questions and then. Okay. I would like you to expand on the fact that you mentioned that we should do more research on organic expertise. What does it exactly mean? Okay, so answer this.
So let me tackle both questions. I think what you said, it's very much on target. And when I talk about advocacy and making pressure, is because, and we can go back and look at other examples. And let's think about the ministries of health and justice. What would happen if I became the minister of justice tomorrow? There would be insane outrage from lawyers and attorneys in Colombia, and they would be asking for the president's head and my head in a guillotine. I cannot go and say that because I'm a doctor, I should be the Minister of Health. Because medical doctors, surgeons, physicians would go absolutely crazy. And yet, we are not putting the government on task. Because we're not putting the government on task to say, if you can do this for health, and you can do this for justice, and you're not going to put an educator in the Ministry of Economics, we should demand, using all the proper ways. And I think what happened this weekend should give us inspiration of what we need to do. And I personally think we should demand that the person who's running things at the Ministry of Education should be someone with an education background. And there are people in Colombia capable and competent and prepared enough to handle that. Maybe we have to be more proactive in putting our politicians to task into demanding those things. So maybe we have to do that ourselves. And if we can mobilize students the way we're mobilizing them today, we have to continue mobilizing people using all the forms of peaceful protest that we have. And I emphasize on the peaceful part of it. The moment we start raising a hand into violence, we lost it. We lost the cause, we lost the war. This is a war that we're not going to win it by throwing rocks. This is a war that we're going to win with our intellects, with the sum of our intellects. But I agree with you. We have to deal with politics. So maybe we have to start, if we put them there, let's call them to task. Because last time I checked, they don't elect themselves. So maybe we have to create other ways of advocacy. Now, to answer Rigoberto's question, the idea of organic expertise means that us academics need to be grounded in the reality that we have expertise in some areas, but that when we interact with people in the communities, they know the field better than we do. They know what's going on better than we do. When I teach research at my university, I always tell my students, there is a reason we do research. It's because we don't know the answer. I always tell my students when they do, there is a reason you conduct a research study. It's because you don't know or you can't find the answer, so you need to find it. And sometimes you need to find the answer by talking to people who know the answer. So it's a principle of a sense of humility, that constructing a community means I acknowledge that you have expertise on things, and teachers in the field have levels of expertise about what's going on in the country that university professors can only ask about. Because we are not in the classrooms anymore. We are not dealing with the children in the public schools, in the rural schools, in the private schools. We have to go and ask our teachers to tell us what's going on. So that's what I mean by organic expertise. We have to recognize that people in the schools and the communities, they know something. That maybe what they're lacking is the means and the resources to verbalize it, to publish it. Because maybe they have great ideas, but they don't know how to write an academic paper. Or they don't know where to publish. And that's where we come in. And that's what I mean by organic expertise.
Anyone else? Comment? Reaction? Please.
Okay, very good morning. My name is Daniel Rodriguez. I'm a LeBase student. And first of all, I would like to acknowledge that your presentation was amazing, Mr. Raúl. And my question is directed to you as a teacher who proposes like the importance of telling our children and our parents why is it important to learn another language. How do you see that future in which our students are told the importance of learning a different language? How is the future in our field? If we told our students, if we told our parents, what's the importance of learning a different language?
We're giving Raúl time to think. Another question?
Another question or
You see, when I came up with this question, and I mean, I haven't really verbalized the question until about a month ago. When I was giving an interview, someone who was working on her master's thesis, and they asked me what's wrong with language teaching in Colombia today. And I said, one of the problems, one of the things that's wrong is that we're not telling children why. But for me, the word, because again, since I have some background in critical theory, the question of why is fundamental. I'm still trying to figure out that answer myself because it's a very loaded question. And I'm very well aware of the commitment that we have to engage in to get there. But you asked me about the future. If we started telling people why they should learn a language, well, I see multiple scenarios. I could see a future where people maybe would start diversifying the language learning, where not necessarily everybody would have to learn English, and other people would take other languages. I could see a future where people might actually become interested in indigenous languages, because now you have a reason to learn it. We haven't given Colombians a reason to learn an indigenous language. In fact, even though we are descendants of indigenous people, we haven't given Colombians a reason to think of themselves as indigenous. We think of ourselves, you know the joke that they say that the Colombians is the higher class wants to be European, the middle class wants to be American, and the lower class wants to be Mexican. I remember the joke. That summarizes our problem. No, we are indigenous. And if we think about it, I always make, when I was in Illinois, I always make the comment, yeah, they talk about multiracial people. We have been here for 500 years. We are the original hipsters. We were multilingual multiracial before it was cool. We are the original hipsters. Before multilingual became fashionable with Halle Berry and Barack Obama, we have been here for 500 years. We're African, European, Polynesian, a little bit of Viking, and Indian. We have all those, with a little bit of everything, just with different colors and gradations, but we all have a little bit of everything. Or you think those when you got the curly hair that it comes from Africa. That's not from the Vikings, that's not from Thor. But that's the first issue is we haven't really told Colombian people, no, you are indigenous and you are Afro and you are everything because we are a mixture and it's wonderful that we're a mixture. It's charming that we're a mixture. And so I see that future because even though sometimes I show very bleak statistics, I'm very much a John Lennon at heart. I'm insanely optimistic. Insanely. Even when I lose hope, I still remain insanely optimistic. And the reason I remain insanely optimistic, to be honest, is to see so many undergrads in my talk. I'm going to teach my class at 2, and I'm going with more optimism because I had undergrads. Now, and I see it because I teach my undergrads, and I work with my undergrads at Bolivariana, and I see that they have commitment. So what do I see the future when we tell children why they should learn a language? I see better language learners. But most importantly, because even though I'm in the business of teaching languages, I am in the mission of educating people. And it's important that you can see yourselves in the business of learning languages, but remember, you are in the mission of educating people. And once you keep those priorities straight, I feel optimistic. I could be wrong, but it doesn't happen very often, but I could be wrong.
Muy bien, Mora, excelente respuesta. Yo quiero cerrar esta presentación con un comentario, así como Raúl abrió con el titular de la prensa. Hay algo que es una invitación a ser lectores críticos, como dijiste tú en la presentación, a leer entre líneas. Yo también leí que algún ministro se quejaba de que en Colombia no teníamos personas bilingües, que no había bilingüismo y que por lo tanto todas estas empresas de call centers no podían contratar personal o expandirse por toda Colombia porque definitivamente no teníamos personas que hablaran inglés aunque estuvieran tomando desde la primaria y secundaria. Este comentario, que fue un gran titular, no hay personas bilingües para los call centers que queremos poner, inmediatamente el estigma se hace sobre los profesores y se hace sobre el sector público. Nadie se preguntó si todos los colegios bilingües, los que son bilingües y los autodenominados bilingües y los parvulitos bilingües, si todos estos no enviaron sus solicitudes a estos call centers. ¿Por qué creen ustedes que un colegio AAA o una egresada o egresado de un colegio AAA no envió su hoja de vida a estos call centers? No es porque no es bilingüe, ¿verdad? Es porque pagan una miseria. Y por supuesto que no van a ir al call center a emplearse. Entonces, entonces vamos a crear es como técnicos y hacemos cursos virtuales y hacemos todas estas cosas para creernos el cuento de que tenemos que formar personas con skill labor, que es muy barato, para que estos call centers lo traigan. Entonces, este es un ejemplo de inequidad y de estigmatizar. Un ejemplo que nos pone a pensar y no dejarnos, como dijiste tú muy bien en la charla, who's the culprit, no dejarnos echar la culpa, ¿right? Entonces los dejamos con esos pensamientos y ustedes pueden, esta presentación está acá y en los otros documentos que están en línea y que están disponibles bajo el nombre de Raúl Mora y su producción, les invito a continuar el debate y a continuar el estudio. Muchísimas gracias por esta audiencia, muchísimas gracias por venir. Thank you. Bye bye.